let's get started while others are still joining. My name is Jack London. I'm the Executive Director of the California Access to Justice Commission. We are really happy to have Heather Jarvis here to present to you. She is a national expert on student loans, and she's a lawyer and a public interest lawyer who is now devoting herself to helping other public interest lawyers stay in this work by managing their student debt. She is a terrific speaker. We're happy to have her. And before I turn it over to her, let me just let you know that this meeting is being recorded. The way we'll conduct it is that you should put your questions. This is a question and answer session, as you know. Put your questions into the chat and Heather will respond to them based on what she sees in the chat. Let me now turn it over to Heather Jarvis to get us started.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's an exciting time in the world of student loans. There's loads of stuff to cover, and I'm delighted to be able to take your questions today. We originally planned to talk about almost nothing but public service loan forgiveness and the waiver that is presently in effect. And I think we will spend a fair amount of time on that, but I do want to acknowledge that since we scheduled the session, the president has made a big announcement about student loans. And so there are many other topics that are front of mind right now. We now know that payments will resume on federal student loans at the first of next year. That is really going to happen this time. We have also learned about a one-time debt cancellation of $10,000 or $20,000 that is going to start happening in October. I want to give you a little bit of information about that. We'll talk about public service loan forgiveness, both what's in place right now and what we expect going forward. And there are a couple of other things going on as well. So I have some slides that I'm going to just blow through that Jasmine sent around to folks who had registered in advance of this session. And it will also be posted on the California Access to Justice Commission's website, along with the recording of this presentation. I also want to just underscore that today is September 15th, 2022, that we have only the information we have today, and that these topics are developing on a daily basis. So there may be some information we discuss today that gets stale before too long. So if you're listening to the recording, be sure to go to the official sources of information for updated news and information. All right, so that said, I'm going to take about 5 minutes to go through some stuff, some introductory remarks, and then I'm going to do exclusively answering of your questions. But I do want to encourage you to think about how to craft your questions. So let me just say at the get-go, it is less possible for me to consider your individual circumstances and apply the rules to your individual circumstances than it is for me to answer more general questions about the way the rules work. So just keep that in mind while you're crafting your questions. So we will be starting payments again in January. So what you want to do is make sure your contact information is up to date and you're enrolled in a repayment plan. You'll be getting some information before your payment is due, about at least 3 weeks before your payment is due. When it comes to the one-time debt cancellation that the president has announced, there are some threats of lawsuits from some who are not happy about loan forgiveness. And so I have some concern that that could occur and that there could be potentially even some delay in this loan cancellation, which is why it's vital that you subscribe for updates at the Department of Education website, as you see here on your screen, so that you receive notification when the application is available. We're told that will be early October. And when the application is available, apply right away. It will be great if we can get some folks through the system in order to get some loan cancellation before we see any possible slowing of the process, if that in fact occurs. So sign up for those alerts, as you can see here on these slides. Again, this is information that is available to you in a PDF form that has been distributed. So I'm going to refer to the studentaid.gov website a lot. That's where you can log in and go through the whole process of finding out what kind of student loans you have. These are just screenshots from my own account so that you know how to click through to find out what kind of loans you have, whether you got Pell Grants or not. The loan cancellation is going to be $20,000 for people with Pell Grants who meet the income limitations, and $10,000 for people who did not receive Pell Grants and who meet these income limitations. So that information is available for you here. You can find out whether you meet the income limitations by looking at your tax returns. And I've got some visual aids to show you how to do that there. Public service loan forgiveness is what we're mostly here to talk about. It has been fraught with peril, and folks have had a hard time getting the relief that they've been entitled to. For that reason, there is this limited waiver in place that is going to help us get credit for periods we wouldn't have been credited for in the past. And there are many specific rules about how that works that we've set out for you in our previous session that you can watch on the website, or that you can read through again here in these materials that are being presented to you. But the primary things that we need to do are find out whether or not you need to consolidate. You need to consolidate if you have older federal loans that are not already direct loans, and you must do that before October 31st in order to have the terms of the waiver applied to your account. The second thing everybody needs to think about doing is to certify their employment. These are, again, visual aids to show you how to check what kinds of loans you have. Certify your employment using the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Help tool at studentaid.gov. Populate the form, print it, sign it, submit it. If you've already done it and you haven't seen your payment accounts plussed up yet, you can always do it again. And some of us will in fact benefit from doing that. So let me just do one last thing before I start with the Q&A, which is that I'm going to launch a little poll here and give you a minute to answer it. And this is going to help me understand where to focus our attention on the Q&A today. We do have a lot of participants, so it may be somewhat difficult for me to get to every single question, which is why I'm especially interested to see which topics are of the most interest to you. And I will get to as many questions as possible. So just give you another second to respond to this question. I can see that you are all doing it now, and then we'll be able to focus on what are the most confusing aspects of these programs. So it looks like we've had a lot of participation already, but I'll just hum a little Jeopardy song. And then I'll be ending the poll. So if you want to answer it, do it now. Bum, bum, bum. Okay. Sharing the results. So we've got a lot of interest in the limited waiver, and specifically with regard to qualifying employment and problems with your payment counts. Not surprised to see that there. Also a fair amount of interest in the one-time cancellation, of course. Makes sense to me that those are the topics on your mind, and we will address each of those. So let me stop that sharing and go to the chat and start taking your questions. All right. So Joan mentioned that she has not paid loans since COVID, but graduated before COVID and is wondering if she qualifies. So Joan, you certainly can be eligible for President Biden's one-time debt cancellation. There's no requirement that you be employed. Public service loan forgiveness requires employment, full-time public service employment. So people don't have to pay their loans during the COVID suspension in order to get credit for those months towards public service loan forgiveness. Normally you have to make payments, but during the COVID suspension, payments are not required, but full-time qualifying public service employment still is. Joshua asks how we find out what payments will be under the new proposed income-driven plan. So Joshua, it's a little premature for us to know. We've been given only broad outlines of what the new income-driven plan will be. We do know that the goal is to make it most beneficial for people with undergraduate loans. So it will be tailored so that graduate and professional loans are granted less relief from the new program. But what they will be doing is increasing the amount of income that can be protected. So under the income-driven plans, they look at the federal poverty rate that corresponds with the borrower's family size. And under the existing plans, they protected 150% of that amount before any portion was required to be sent to student loan payments. Under the new plan, it's going to be a higher percentage. So 225, I think is what I saw, 225% of federal poverty. So that will help everyone. And then it will also be a lower percentage of the income we earn above that amount that will be required to be sent to student loans, particularly though undergraduate loans. So in answer to Joshua's question, how do you find out what your payments would be under the new plan? The answer is you don't find that out yet. You will be able to find that out later. But right now we're waiting for them to publish proposed rules for the new IDR plan. Then there will be a period of public comment. And then finally, there will be finalized rules, which are likely to not take effect until July 1st of 2023, unless they do something to fast track it. So it's a little too soon to say is the answer to that. Maria asks, what can we do with Perkins loans? Perkins loans are a special kind of federal student loan that are campus-based federal loans. So they are not, in fact, federally held, although they are federal loans. So you've got options for Perkins loans. First thing you want to do, Maria, is look at the Perkins cancellation provisions. You can just Google that or look at the student aid site for it. And the cancellation provisions mostly apply to people who are in teaching or sometimes public defenders, also military service members. But there are not a whole lot of attorneys that qualify for Perkins cancellation. If it doesn't seem like you can get your Perkins loans canceled by virtue of their Perkins-ness, then you can consolidate them into a direct consolidation loan. You also do that at the studentaid.gov site, and that makes them eligible for public service loan forgiveness, as well as for the income-driven repayment plans. And that's what to do with Perkins loans. Few of you guys have Perkins loans. People are wondering about how to know if you got a Pell Grant. You can tell that at the studentaid.gov site if you log in there. Also part of the slide deck we prepared for you. Natasha asks, how do you get a job that you did a long time ago to count for public service loan forgiveness? So it is the work that we have done in public service since October 1st, 2007 that we can count. Anything before that is disregarded because PSLF started October 1st, 2007. In order to get any job counted since then, all you need to do is prepare and file that form that we call the PSLF form. And the best way to do that is using the PSLF help tool, which is on the studentaid.gov site. Get the federal employer ID number that corresponds with your jobs and put it in that tool, which will track a database that the Department of Ed has and should pull up your employers. Not every qualifying employer is in the database, but many are. Populate the form, print it, sign it, get it signed by your job, and file it with MOHELA is where it gets filed before October 31st. Before October 31st, Halloween of this year. Super, super important. Yes. So, and then Joshua asks if I can confirm that the new IDR plan is applicable with public service loan forgiveness. Yes, it will be. It's statutory that the income-driven repayment options are a path to public service loan forgiveness, and that will be the same for the new IDR plan. Alana took out a new loan for grad school this summer and is wondering if that loan is going to qualify for the one-time debt cancellation. The rule is that you have to have been issued the loan. It has to have been dispersed is the terminology before June 30, 2022. So June 30 is the cutoff. So for the summer session, you probably did get it dispersed in time to get it canceled, but for the fall session, folks probably didn't. That's the deadline. Rebecca, this is not for credit card debt. There's nothing we're talking about today applies to credit card debt at all. Michelle asks if there's information about the expected timeline to bring back previous PSLF qualifying payment counts under the waiver to a newly consolidated loan that has been reset to zero. So what Michelle is referring to is that when you consolidate loans now and during this interim period, there is a period of time where the payment count is set to zero, the qualifying payment count for public service loan forgiveness, which can be very startling and uncomfortable for us. And what she's waiting on is to have the terms of the waiver applied to the loans, where they, in fact, under the terms of the waiver, will pierce the veil of the consolidation and look through it in order to assess the payment history of the underlying loans. That will occur. On what expected timeline? We've only been told months. We've been told that it will not be completed by the expiration of the waiver, which is October 31st. So again, you have to consolidate and file your PSLF forms before October 31st, but the government has said they won't finish processing those until after the deadline. So the review does not have to be complete before that date and will not be complete. It will take, they say, several more months, whatever that means. But what I would do, Michelle, is I encourage you to keep an eye on your accounts with MOHELA. And somebody might ask this later, or it may be here in my queue, but let me also just say that a lot of us are having loans transferred from one servicing company to another. The federal government hires a lot of different companies that administer the loan programs. MOHELA, it's an acronym, stands for Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority, is going to be assigned to public service loan forgiveness. They are transferring loads of loans from Fed loan to MOHELA. It's happening right now. It's been happening for months, and it will be happening for months. So don't be surprised if you have gotten or get notification that your loans are being transferred to MOHELA. What you want to do is whenever you get that information, visit the MOHELA site. It's mohela.com and create an account. And if you click create an account on MOHELA and they don't recognize you yet, it's because your loans are either still with your old servicer or still in transit. But as soon as you can create an account with MOHELA, do it. And when you do it, you can see what your payment count is towards public service loan forgiveness. There's a payment tracker. But as Michelle pointed out for us, don't be surprised if it's not accurate right away. It may change more than once as the review is ongoing. Adriana says, what if I can't submit all my PSLF form before the 10/31 deadline because employers are not responding to my requests? Can I submit them after the deadline if I've converted my direct loan and submitted some PSLF forms? Adriana, on the one hand, yes, you may submit the forms after the 31st. Some people will need to if they have not already finished making all the payments to qualify for the forgiveness, but not you. So if you have past employment that you've not certified yet, you must file those forms before the 31st. Do not wait. If you can't get it signed, first of all, try as hard as you can. I understand it might not be possible. Try to get them signed. If you can't get them signed, there's a checkbox at the bottom of the first page of the form that says, I can't get this signed for whatever reason. And don't click that box unless you have to, because that will delay things. But if you have to submit the forms without a signature, do it. Don't wait until after October 31st, or you won't have the relaxed rules of the waiver applied. And the relaxed rules are important because the old rules were so rigid that you could have made a payment like a day late and it wouldn't have counted. And so the employment is almost certainly going to qualify. Like that part is a lot less difficult and a lot less nuanced. So don't wait, file the forms if you have to without a signature by checking that box. Tracy wants to know how long MOHELA is taking. They're taking a long time, and it's probably going to get slower. Since this announcement about the other debt cancellation, the government sites have been bogged down and breaking down and everything else. So I certainly don't recommend holding your breath, and I can't say how long it would take. Like at the beginning, they were going through more quickly because mainly they did the easier cases first. So it could take a very long time, but make sure your stuff is in on time. And that's about the best we can do. Yeah, so Mariel says that she heard everyone should apply for the waiver before the deadline, just in case. I agree with that. And that when you submit the application, she's asking if that qualifies as an application for consideration of the waiver. It does. So to have the terms of the waiver applied to you, you simply need to have certified employment. That is the essential key, that PSLF form that we're talking about. And yes, it also qualifies or serves as an application for the loan cancellation itself. So if they count you all the way up to 120 payments or beyond, or 120 months, then they will cancel your debt as a result of that same form, which is now just called the PSLF form. Jennifer asks if full-time volunteer work at a qualified organization prior to bar passage can count. No, it cannot. So volunteer work is not sufficient. It has to be full-time paid employment. You have to receive a W-2 from the employer and get paid. Chloe wants to know about getting long time ago jobs. How do I demonstrate it was qualified? Because Chloe had a fellowship and has gotten conflicting information about it. I see. So Chloe, the actual rule is that you're meant to be a W-2 employee, so meaning not a contract employee, not positioned at a host organization, but paid by someone else. And the job that claims you as an employee needs to either be a 501c3 nonprofit organization or a government, state, local, federal, or tribal government employer, plus a few other very narrowly defined nonprofit positions. So if you have someone at a C3 who will sign a form for you with their federal employer ID number, then you're golden. If you don't, it's very difficult. So you don't necessarily need like a whole lot of extra documentation unless you're trying to cram some kind of a non-C3 nonprofit into qualification, which is possible, in which case you have to document that you did one of certain listed services that are on that PSLF form. So if you want to tell us more about the fellowship, maybe we can be more specific than that. Yeah, so Margaret's asking about the time that was spent in deferment and forbearance. So deferment and forbearance are both words that mean a status of loans where no payments are required temporarily. And under the terms of the limited waiver, we can progress towards public service loan forgiveness for periods of forbearance if the forbearance was 12 consecutive months or more, or for periods of 36 months cumulatively in forbearance. And the reason they came up with those numbers is because we were not supposed to be allowed to be in forbearance for more than 36 cumulative months. There are limits that were not always applied by servicers. And also because servicers have had a tendency to steer, as we call it, us into forbearances because it was easier for them, not better for borrowers. It can be really tricky for you to read your own record and see what those forbearances are. But if you want to try, you can download a text file of your student aid record at the studentaid.gov site. Once you log in, you can hover over your name in the top right corner. You can go to My Aid, and then there's a little hyperlink that says download my aid data. And it's this text file, which can be difficult to read, but which has a reverse chronological history of your loans. So you'll see these dates where it entered and exited a forbearance status, and you can try to count the months. It's really hard to do, even if you've seen a lot of those records like I have. So in general, I think it's less useful for you to try to figure out exactly how many months you're going to get credit for than it is for you to be sure you've documented all your public service employment so that you can get credit for the most months possible. And recognize that this counting of forbearances is only under the terms of the waiver. So again, have to file your stuff before October 31st. Otherwise, the forbearance periods don't count under the normal rules. Okay. Alicia is asking about the timing of consolidation and employment certification. First, initiate your consolidation if you need to consolidate. Do that right away. Do it now. Do it at studentaid.gov. Well, not right now. Finish listening to the Q&A and then do it. Don't wait for it to finish processing because it may well take longer than you have. So when you have submitted the consolidation, prepare the PSLF forms, get them signed, and then submit them. If you're not already assigned to MOHELA, you have to fax the forms to them because you can't upload them and associate them with your account. But what I would do is I would apply for the consolidation. Then I would fax the signed forms to MOHELA. And then when my consolidation went through and I have an account at MOHELA, I would then upload the same forms that I'd already submitted by fax to my account so that they could be associated with my name at MOHELA. So that is the smart move. Paulina asks about how the forgiveness works for those that took out undergraduate loans, worked at qualifying nonprofits, and then took out graduate loans and are back working at a nonprofit. So there's two answers to that, Paulina. Under normal rules, the forgiveness is associated with each individual loan rather than with an individual borrower. So if you may qualify for cancellation of your undergraduate loans sooner than for your graduate loans. which doesn't help you much, because when you make payments under an income-driven plan, your payments are not going to go down just because you got some of your loans canceled, your undergraduate loans, for example. So it can be a little less satisfying. You have to keep paying the same amount. It's just going to your law loans until you get the cancellation. But under the terms of the limited waiver, if you consolidate your student loans together, the consolidation loan will be credited with the maximum number of months towards forgiveness of any of the underlying loans that were included in the consolidation. So if you have undergraduate loans that have more credit towards cancellation than your law loans, it would be smart for you to consolidate all of your loans together, because then you could fast track your law loans and get them on the schedule of the undergraduate loans, which would not happen under normal circumstances. And yes, so then boom, Alicia, it was like reading my mind and asking, can we consolidate federal loans with different payment counts so they have the max payment count? Yes. And guys, don't be surprised if when you go to consolidate, you see some scary looking language about how consolidation will reset your payment count, and how you might not want to consolidate loans that you've already made progress towards forgiveness on. Those warnings are still there because they used to be true. They will be true again, but they are presently suspended. So you have to kind of steel your spine and remember that, in fact, we have been told and retold and confirmed that there is no risk to consolidating right now, that people who consolidate will get credit, the maximum amount of credit on the whole consolidation loan that was available on any of the underlying loans. So consolidate now, include all your loans if you have multiple loans with different payment counts. And Marissa, no, the consolidation is not normally quick, but it does not have to be completed before the deadline. It just has to be, you just have to apply for it before the deadline. Joy says ineligible loans with zero balance stated to have been consolidated into a direct consolidation loan. That's not a problem. So if you previously consolidated loans into a direct consolidation loan, the direct consolidation loan is eligible for public service loan forgiveness. It's not a problem if the underlying loans were not eligible. In fact, that's why we consolidate. Is in order to make ineligible loans into eligible loans, like a direct loan. Natasha's wondering about loans in her parents' name. So the PSLF waiver does not apply precisely to Parent Plus loans, and Parent Plus loans are owed by parents. So if Natasha has loans in her name, but Natasha's mother also borrowed loans, Natasha, you can earn forgiveness of the loans in your name based on your public service. Your mother could potentially earn forgiveness of her loans that she borrowed for your benefit based on her own public service, but not based on your public service. So Parent Plus loans are owed by the parent and can be forgiven based on the parent's service. But Parent Plus loans are not being given the special treatment of the waiver, except that we have been told that consolidation loans that include a Parent Plus loan will have the terms of the waiver applied. So they've been a little inconsistent in their messaging about parent loans. In fact, don't even get me started on that, because I had to beat some heads at the Department of Education when they first made the announcements about their confusion about how Parent Plus loans are treated under the law. So Parent Plus loans are definitely a special case, and not having the waiver applied to them in total. Yes, so I think I have answered the question. Consolidate initiate the consolidation application before October 31st. Doesn't matter if it hasn't been finished being processed. Sandra wants to know if California is going to tax loans forgiven under public service loan forgiveness. So public service loan forgiveness is not taxable under federal law and will not be taxed at the federal level. My understanding, the last I looked at it, is that California tracks the federal treatment of taxation of PSLF and income-driven repayment forgiveness insofar as those forgivenesses are not taxable under California law. But what I think is the case is that it's possible that the one-time Biden debt cancellation could be taxable by California, depending on how California interprets the application of the Biden cancellation and what they see as the legal underpinning of it. So I think that PSLF not taxable under California state tax law, although I should say I'm not a tax lawyer, I'm not a tax expert, I'm not a California lawyer, I'm definitely not a California tax expert. So I'm not totally sure, but my understanding based on my cursory review is that PSLF is not taxable in California, but that the Biden cancellation is somewhat less clear and that may be taxable. Although I have a note to contact Jack London about whether we might have to try to get some kind of a rule change in California to protect people from that. Which also answers Sarah's question. So let me just say right now, no student loan forgiveness is taxable at the federal level. All student loan cancellation is tax-free through the end of 2025 at the federal level. And this was done because the Senate wanted President Biden, or some members of the Senate wanted President Biden to do this across the board cancellation. Lisa asks if for the one-time debt relief, you have to include a spouse's income for determining eligibility if you file jointly. Yes, so a married couple filing jointly must have a federal tax return that shows an income of $250,000 or below. We talked about forbearance. Lena asks, if you're in law school now or in school now taking out loans, should you wait to finish to apply for the one-time debt or proceed to apply for the loans you already have? So newer loans will not be eligible for the cancellation. So you might as well apply for the loans you already have because it is only applicable to loans borrowed before June 30th of 2022. It can apply to grad school loans, as it doesn't have to be undergraduate loans in answer to Laura's question, but it does have to be loans that were taken out before June 30th. Sophia asks whether work as a 1099 contractor for a nonprofit is qualifying for public service loan forgiveness. So, Sophia, the Department of Education, so far in the history of public service loan forgiveness, has refused to allow contractors who are not W-2 employees, but who get 1099s to be considered in qualifying employment for public service loan forgiveness. In my view, that is not justified by the statutory language that created public service loan forgiveness. And I have put forward that argument strongly together with other advocates in response to some proposed regulations, new regulations for PSLF. So I have some hope, although it's not firm, that they might improve the regulations to allow 1099 employees to qualify in certain instances. I also have some hope that could be applied retroactively. But the short answer is that they've said no. They've been consistently saying no, but we're still trying to get them to change their mind. And there's some potential for some litigation on that point. So I would, to be honest, what I would do is if I was a 1099 contractor, I would file those PSLF forms, even knowing that they may well be denied. I would file them before the limited waiver is over. And just in case we end up winning some kind of an argument later that might be applied retroactively. And if you want to contact me offline so that you can get notified of stuff like that, do feel free. So yeah, Venus is asking about loan cancellation for students from Westwood College. I'd seen some stuff about colleges defrauding students. I don't have all the names of the colleges right in my mind right now, but what you're talking about, Venus, is called borrower defense to repayment. And there are many schools that are bad actors that have been identified as such, and where people who got loans when they were at those schools are getting relief. So I'll direct you again to the studentaid.gov website. On the home page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's announcements. And you want to look for the stuff that addresses borrower defense to repayment. You may even see the name of Westwood there and look to that information. There was recently a big settlement in a case called Sweet versus Cardona that applied to borrower defense to repayment. And there have been lots of across the board cancellations. But what I want you to find out is whether you have to apply for the relief or whether you might be part of a class that gets the relief automatically. So Nixie asking about what happens to the payment count on Perkins loans when you consolidate. Well, a Perkins loan isn't going to have any credit towards forgiveness because you can't make qualifying payments on a Perkins loan. So it would have been zero anyway before you consolidated. But then once it's part of the consolidation loan, the consolidation should have credit for the maximum number of payments that any of the underlying loans had. So the Perkins would have zero, but if you also had other loans that had more than zero, that's where the whole consolidation loan should end up. It's Zul wanting to know about how you can tell if you need to consolidate. There is a walkthrough. We definitely addressed it in our earlier session that we did with the California Access to Justice Commission, available on their website. Also, you'll see the screenshots in the visual aids that Jasmine has been distributing. Employment. So Jacqueline asks if employment after October 2007 counts before you had loans. No. So what they're going to do is they're going to look at your dates of employment and they're going to see where that overlaps with the dates that you had loans in a repayment status, which occurs for the first time 6 months after you graduate or withdraw from school when the grace period is up. So it is the period where your loans entered repayment 6 months after graduation that corresponds with your employment. That's the period that's going to count. Probably better to consolidate all your loans, Nixie, instead of multiple direct loans. I mean, you can have multiple direct loans. You don't have to consolidate if you already have direct loans. But if you have different payment counts on different loans and you want to get all of them to the max, you do that by consolidating. Or if you have older loans that are not direct loans, you must consolidate them. All right, I've already told you what to do in terms of non-responsive for signing. File the forms before October 31st. Michelle, e-signatures are not accepted from the employers. They have to be wet signatures, which means they can be drawn with pen and ink or on a trackpad or with a mouse, but they can't be typed and they can't be a truly digital signature. Yeah, Rosemary, I think I told you all about the box to check if you can't get your employer to sign. Yes, wet signatures are required, but scans of ink signatures are fine. That's considered wet, even though it doesn't have to be original. Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of people are having that issue where even if you've submitted the PSLF form, by checking that box that says I can't get a signature, that they're like, oh, denied, it didn't have a signature. So everyone, make sure you have filed those forms, whether they have signatures or not, and that even if you get something that later says, okay, you didn't have a signature, if it's filed before October 31st, you should be safe. And then there's going to be additional things you can do. And the additional things you can do, well, first you can complain to MOHELA directly. Do it in writing, don't call, do it in writing, upload it to your account, and then wait, and they'll probably just tell you to wait and wait and wait. Do that. Also go to the studentaid.gov site. There at the very top of the site in really small print is a submit a complaint link. Do that. Then navigate to the student loan ombudsman, also through that same site, and fill out the form to complain to the ombudsman and say, hey, ombudsman, I couldn't get a signature. I submitted the thing. I just got this generic letter. I need you to help me navigate this. And last, after you do those things, there is now a formal reconsideration process for PSLF that you can also access through studentaid.gov. But I don't want you to do that first, because that's just going to put you at the end of a long queue. And it is much better to get the waiver applied than to get into some reconsideration. So that's essentially all you can really do. Laura, an international NGO abroad is typically not going to qualify. It's not that you have to work in the US for it to be qualifying employment. It's just that you have to, if it's an international organization that is not acknowledged as a tax-exempt nonprofit organization in the US, it isn't going to be seen as qualifying in most cases. Although I do encourage you to try to challenge the system a little bit and see if you can make an argument. So the first thing to try to do is see whether you can fill out that PSLF form and get a signature, even if there is no federal employer ID number. Now you're probably going to see a denial, but that would prepare you to submit a request for reconsideration, and that's really the only chance you have of showing it to be a public service job, at which point you would have to assert that you provide one of the listed services on the form. But in general, there's not a whole lot of foreign employment that qualifies unless it's a US-based nonprofit that positions some people abroad, or for example, like a US government job that has people abroad. Certainly, we know that we've been clearly told that employment for foreign governments and intergovernmental organizations does not qualify. Wakila asks if you have to have a PSLF form for each nonprofit company you worked at. Yes, you do. Aaron asks if all of our loans are currently in IDR plans that qualify for PSLF. Is there any reason or benefit under the current waiver to consolidate, or do we continue to submit the certification forms on a regular basis? There's no need to consolidate if your loans are already direct loans and if you have the same progress towards forgiveness on all your underlying loans, but do plan to continue to submit the forms on a regular basis and also monitor the count and make sure that it is increasing as it should. The transfer to MOHELA should happen automatically for people who are with Fed loan servicing now and for people who file PSLF forms. That's the trigger for getting switched to MOHELA. So yeah. So Sarah has not been paying under the so-called right repayment plans for public service loan forgiveness. And yes, those payments may now count. That's one of the great things about the waiver, is that loads of us were told, oh, you're not in the right repayment plan, or you don't have the right kind of loans. Well, those things have been waived. So if you have done all the public service, document all the public service, then you don't have to have been in the right repayment plan, and you can get credit for your time in service. So yes, Omar is asking, he was working towards PSLF, but he had problems because he'd had the wrong kind of loans. He was told they didn't qualify. And so he's asking me to confirm that all he needs to do is consolidate and file those PSLF forms, and then he should get credit for all the past years of payments he made on the so-called wrong loans to Navient. And that is exactly right, Omar. You are the sort of person that this is meant to help. So yes, and people can start working towards PSLF right now, and anytime. And the loan is, Nargis, supposed to be per student loan, not per person, but it is associated with the person who has each loan, right? So the service has to be completed by the borrower of the loan, but then the forgiveness is associated with the loan. All right, now I am going to go here. So people are wondering, there's a lot of confusion, understandably, about loan servicing companies and who you're with and who you should be with. So the federal government hires a bunch of different outfits, right? Navient, AidVantage, Great Lakes, Nelnet, MOHELA, there's tons of them, FedLoan. For the most part, if you have previously filed PSLF forms, those ones that document your public service employment, that usually, in most cases, but not all, triggered you to get your loans transferred to FedLoan. That was what had been happening over the last many years. If you filed a PSLF form before about a year ago, you probably got transferred to FedLoan. If you were at FedLoan for any reason, many of us have already been transferred to MOHELA, because FedLoan quit servicing, and they announced that about a year ago. And they were supposedly getting out of the loan servicing business by the end of this calendar year, although it's a little uncertain if that's exactly happening. Excuse me. So if you're with FedLoan, you'll probably get switched to MOHELA automatically and anytime soon. Or if you're with anyone else and you file a PSLF form, you should now be transferred to MOHELA. But it doesn't matter which loan servicer you're with. You can be with any loan servicer at all. You don't have to do anything to make sure your loans are at MOHELA. What you have to do is file those PSLF forms before October 31st, which will also probably serve to transfer you to MOHELA. In any event, the form gets filed with MOHELA whether you're there or not. So that is that. Lena asks, can you have the one-time debt forgiveness now and then in the future get public service loan forgiveness for loans you're getting for graduate school now? Yes, absolutely. That can work for sure. So if you've got some debt right now, 10,000 or 20,000, if you have Pell Grants, you can apply for and get that canceled under President Biden's one-time cancellation. You can only get canceled up to as much as you owe, right? So if you don't owe 10,000, you only owe 5, you'll only get 5 canceled. But then yes, public service loan forgiveness will continue to be available even for loans that you haven't borrowed yet. And you would just have to jump through all the hoops in order to get the forgiveness going forward. And I do want to make sure I mention that I know I've already mentioned this, the limited waiver is over October 31st, but then there will be new public service loan forgiveness regulations that are meant to be easier than the old scheme that was so difficult for people to meet the requirements of. There's some ways in which it's not as generous as the limited waiver. So people should continue to care about the details and keep yourselves focused. And essentially what you want to be aware of is that when payments do resume in January, and if you're still working toward forgiveness, you need to think about an income-driven repayment plan. And there are many different plans under that larger category. And you want to do that. You want to recertify your income when prompted so that you're always enrolled in an income-driven plan. You want to pay the full amount due when it's due, and you want to continue certifying your employment with that same PSLF form about once a year, and check your accounts to make sure that they are crediting you with progress towards forgiveness, and always monitor it so that you can catch any errors early and get yourself situated. Kathy had some schools in an in-school deferment status and wanting to know if those can count towards PSLF. Kathy, that is a little bit unclear. What we're told is from the Department of Education is that in-school deferment before 2013 will count, but not after. And the reason that they're telling us that is that the department's own records are less complete before 2013, so they're not really sure what deferment is which, whereas after then they got some additional coding in their records so they can actually tell if you were in school or not. So in-school deferments are not supposed to count in normal circumstances, and we're told will not count for periods after 2013, but I would still file your stuff, your PSLF forms. I would file it now in order to get credit. If credit can be had, now is the time to get it. Bautran applied to consolidate wrong loans 2 years ago, and half were direct that had been paid on for 8 years, so wanting to know whether to consolidate again. So Bautran, if you have only a direct consolidation loan and you don't have any additional loans that have not been consolidated, you can't consolidate, you can't reconsolidate one direct consolidation loan. You have to have something else to roll in, but you shouldn't need to do that because they should still apply the terms of the waiver to that consolidation loan that you got 2 years ago and give you credit for the maximum number of payments on the underlying loans, even if you got that consolidation 2 years ago. So what you need to do in order to get that to happen is to file or refile those employment certifications on that PSLF form so that they will review the whole history of your consolidation and the underlying loans. And this period of COVID forbearance counts for everybody. So if you certify your employment during the COVID forbearance, your public service employment, then your payments will count. I mean, the months will count, whether you made payments or not. You don't have to have made payments during the COVID forbearance. You just have to have been in a full-time public service job. So now, folks, I know I didn't get everybody's questions. I'm sorry that I didn't get everybody's questions. I got as many questions as I could, and I really enjoyed talking to you all today. And I will make myself available for additional such sessions with the California Access to Justice Commission and your other organizations if you'd like to reach out about scheduling something. And before I let you go, let me also please say that many people can benefit from these forgivenesses. So please pass the word along to your friends, your family, your colleagues, your clients, and expect to hear from people like me a bunch of times over the next 6 weeks saying, consolidate, certify your employment, file your forms, do it now. And also over the coming year, because I would like to say that President Biden's loan cancellation has this income threshold requirement in order to ensure that the relief goes to people who need it most. But because it has an income requirement, it requires an application and submission of income information, which means, based on our past experience, we know that means that the most needy among us will be less likely to benefit because they will be less likely to apply, less likely to submit tax returns, and less likely to access the relief. And so I would really appreciate any help that you can give me in letting clients and others know how to access this relief. And I think we'll need to do a lot of work to organize and help people move through so that we can make sure that the relief goes where it needs to be, and not just to those of us who are lucky enough to get, access to this kind of assistance. So thanks so much. And thanks to Jack and Jasmine for all of their help.